We call it the 5 Ds: death, disaster, disease, divorce, disagreement. It is about not knowing what's coming. And you can prepare your business so that it is exitable at any time. 73% of business owners regretted having sold their business because they hadn't thought enough about the next stage. What is it that they're going to be? Who are they going to be when they are no longer their business?
Welcome back to the show, Kerry. Great to have you back.
Thank you very much, Debra. It's good to be back. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for those who don't know you, so Kerry, as I introduced her, she is an exit planner. She was also an EOS implementer and one of my colleagues. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your story, Kerry, as to how you got into exit planning and why it's important for you?
Certainly. I think starting back from the days when I had an opportunity to actually do a management buyout, which was for a division of Main Nicholas, which is a large public company, was a large public company back in the mid-1980s, actually. And I was working in the business and the general manager. And Main Nicholas looked ahead and said, what do we want to do strategically? And they decided they wanted to be in the health industry. So being a conglomerate, which was the strategic de rigueur of the 1980s, they decided to divest of a number of different businesses. And so one of which was the business for which I was general manager, Freight Management International. And so I went along to a very dear friend and mentor, John Bowen, and talked to him about the opportunity. And he said, I'll tell you what, Kerry, you write the plan. If you can convince me, I'll help you get the money together. Now, being in a corporate, I had absolutely no idea how to write that plan because you just don't know how to raise money. And as luck would have it, back then, I have to keep reminding people, back in the 1980s, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have Excel spreadsheets. We didn't have mobile phones. We didn't have any of that stuff. So they came along much later. But as I was tearing my hair out and trying to write this plan, I saw an ad for a book in the paper in The Age at the time, which was for a newly released book called Business Plans That Win Dollars that had just been published. And I have that book to this very day.
Yep. Okay.
Still with my Post-it notes in it. And so I tipped out the coupon, sent away for the book and waited for it to arrive because it had to come from the States, and read the book overnight. And then I wrote the plan by the book. And I also found the other day
Oh, the actual plan.
the original plan.
And don't forget, not everybody's watching this. If you can't see the video, this is actually a spiral bound. We had those old spiral bound with an acetate cover and sort of black and white printing business plan. There you go.
Yeah, and I couldn't believe it. When I was clearing out a drawer that had heaps of stuff in it, and there it was. It could have knocked me over with a feather because I thought I'd ditched it years ago. But there we go. I found the original plan. I read the book overnight. I wrote the plan by the book, typed it all myself because, as I said, no computers, none of that. Good old IBM golf ball typewriter. My two of my colleagues within the business helped me do all the number crunching and so forth. They were originally meant to be business partners as well, but in the end they dropped off. So took the plan to my mentor and he read it and, true to his word, helped us get the money together. So
Awesome.
1st of July 1987, we became the proud owners of Freight Management International. Now, before that, of course, I was meant to sign the contract actually on the 15th of May and at the solicitor's office, but I was held up because my daughter was born that day, my first child. So I know that's 38 years ago now because she's just had her first child just recently. So anyway, that didn't deter me or anyone else at the time. So came the 1st of July and the John Bowen helped us get the money together and took over the business with 83 staff, 5 offices around Australia, 120 international agents, and a newborn. Anyway, The first that was my first experience of understanding that I needed to have an exit strategy. I needed to have an exit plan of some description. And look, it was really only one page in this whole plan, and that was to grow the business and sell it somewhere between the 5 and the 10-year mark to an international group. That was what we wanted to do. And we needed an exit strategy because when you have investors, they've got to know how to get their money out. So I like to say now to business owners, no matter what business you're in, everybody needs to have some sort of idea of an exit strategy, what it might be. Doesn't mean that it can't change somewhere down the track, but at least begin with the end in mind, which is the famous or well known statement from Stephen Covey. Habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. And you know what? It's kind of fun to think you might know what the end of the movie is going to look like, to work towards that. So I have to say that the beginning and the end actually worked out. Everything else in the middle was just like a complete roller coaster. As in most businesses, you name it, we had some incredible experiences. Challenging, certainly, on many occasions. Like I remember the first month into the business, my Victorian state manager was actually killed in a car accident, which was awful, really awful. That year as well, Black Monday, the stock market crash, and I mean, so many things just went on. It was crazy. We did recover. We were able to see right through to like the end of the 1980s. The economy was rocketing. It was fantastic. But that industry was an indicator industry. So we felt being in import and export, we could feel the changes that were happening economically before they actually appeared, if you like, to the general populace. So come around 1990, yeah, we were foretelling the recession we had to have when Paul Keating pulled the pin basically on the country, and that was what we had to have, was a recession. So yeah, we went right through that. It was a horrible time. I had to let go, I think it was 18 staff at the time, which was probably one of the worst experiences in business that you'll ever have to do. But we managed through it, and we implemented a process called TQM, Total Quality Management, which is so interesting because I see so much of it in EOS, which is incredible. The whole notion of, having cross-functional teams, so everybody's pulling in the same direction, being able to understand what's really driving your business, and it was terrific, and that actually positioned us really well. We made ourselves attractive to an international buyer, which is what we were heading towards, and we didn't ever put the business on the market. The market actually came to us, which was incredible. So in, what was it? I think year 7, we were approached. We were actually approached a few times, but this was the one that was really, the most important thing for me was that everybody had a job. I didn't care about myself, but so long as I had everyone else having a job, that was the most important part of doing any deal as well. Anyway, we had newly forming business came along and made us a great offer. So 1996, I personally exited the business, retired for the first time. That was for 2 weeks because it was boring. I did have another child already by this time, and anyway, I just no way in the world that I was going to be the stay-at-home mum. But so I started another business in business coaching, but also meanwhile with my husband, we then became equity partners in the real estate business that he'd been working in. So residential real estate and sales and property management. So we had that 2 businesses running in parallel. So I went on to do my business coaching business for about 9 years with 4 other coaches. And we had that was just terrific. Loved all of that. And that was before business coaching was even in anybody's language. We just didn't ever talk about it. And then I the real estate business just was going gangbusters as well. So in 2003, I did retire again and decided that it was time to spend more time with the kids at that stage, and because they were in their teens, and it was just the right sort of timing. And then somebody came along and made us an offer way too good to refuse with the real estate business, which we took in 2007. You know what? You'll never go broke making a profit. So someone comes along and makes us an offer. Hey, thank you very much. Way too good to refuse at that point. And yeah, so that was the second major exit, basically. John stayed on. My husband John stayed on for a couple of years doing list and sell because he needed something to do as well. But it wasn't part of the deal, the contract at all. He was just doing it because he loved to do it. And then, unfortunately, he was diagnosed with bowel cancer. So he basically retired at that point. It took about a couple of years to get him well again. And then we started another real estate business and with another business partner, Greg Hocking. And then I decided I would go back into doing some business coaching again as well. So I had a look around the market, did a bit of research. I saw a press release actually from PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, which talked about baby boomers and the big wave coming through and how they need to be exiting their businesses. And it sort of, the penny dropped and the light bulb went on and said, wow, well, how come nobody's talking about this? And of course, a group like PwC will deal with very large businesses. No one's talking to small businesses about it. And when I delved into the stats a little more deeply, it was quite revealing because 50% of Australia's private businesses were owned by baby boomers. Amazing. 50%, so we need to do something about educating everyone to think about what is it that what do we need to do to get our business ready and exitable? And most of the time, business owners have been able to create a great living for themselves with their businesses, and they've been using their profits to do that, which is terrific. But when it comes time to actually exit or sell, if that's what they want to do, then you've got to be able to demonstrate that it is actually viable when you've taken all the profits out of it. So you have to give yourself a bit of a runway, so that's really the educational trail, if you like, that I've been on for what's that now, 12 years, basically, to be able to help business owners to actually see that they do need to give themselves time, become exit ready, no matter when you want to go. It doesn't really matter. But of course, baby boomers in particular have already, like in 2011, the first baby boomers turned 65. The peak is coming in 2028. There's, yeah, for the highest number who will be turning 65. And then, of course, there's still a huge runway for at least another 10 years, by which time we're well and truly, we have the next generation coming through who are in the same sort of position. So, there's just an understanding that most business owners don't have to really know how to be able to extract themselves and get out of their businesses and create real value so that it's not simply the profits that they've made out of the business. And a lot have been able to get a nice living from the business, but a good deal of their wealth is actually tied up in the business. It's like, you've got asset rich, cash poor, so you've got a lot of value, a lot of equity that's actually tied up in the business that you've worked really hard to create. And how do we make sure that we can release that and make the business transferable rather than it being relying on you? Part of that, of course, is your identity, because that's such a crucial part to be able to create a new you, once let's look
Once
ahead.
the business is gone.
Yeah, once the business is gone. So who are you when you're no longer your business? So it's really important to start working on the new you as well as you're leaving the business. So,
Just let's explore that for a moment, because I mean, you will have seen when people haven't done that, and what is the impact when you don't do that?
so it's usually huge regret. And in fact, this was part of a survey research that was done by the Exit Planning Institute in the US. They do a state of the nation's survey about every 5 years to just check in to see how business owners are responding. And even though it's the US, it reflects here just as vividly as well. And 73% of business owners regretted having sold their business because they hadn't thought enough about the next stage. What is it that they're going to be? Who are they going to be when they are no longer their business? So, spending time and really delving into what it is, what's going to be your next stage is so important. And, you know, most conversations you have with business owners, I say, oh, no, it'll be great. In fact, I use my uncle as an example because he was a self made man, and in his heyday, he had 14 different businesses, 500 staff, big business. And after I'd sold the freight business in 1996, he said to me, Kerry, I wish I'd done what you've just done 10 years ago. And it took him another 10 years to actually get out of those businesses. And I remember even asking him back then, what are you going to do? Oh, it'll be great. I'm going to go and play golf with my mates. I'll 3 times a week. We'll meet for lunch and we'll have, it'll be great. We'll do some more travel. It'll be just fantastic. And I said, oh, yeah, okay, great. Well, 12 months later, he was in clinical depression because but it just wasn't enough. He wasn't fulfilled enough to be able to replace who he was. And, who are you when you used to be somebody, said the person on the golf course. You've got to create a new business card, so to speak, for yourself. And thinking long and hard about that is something that I really work with business owners to do and try to get down some sort of a plan as to what they're going to do. I mean, it's not just them, of course, it's their family, it's other stakeholders, it's the community, there's a whole range of different people that are in that. And exiting your business is gathering the village. So like you hear it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village to actually help you exit your business because aside from your business, it's your personal side of things, as is your personal identity as much as anything else, and your stakeholders, your family, and your financials as well. So you really need good, strong financial advice as around your that process as well.
You start your business because of your passion, because of your kind of core purpose, if you like. And so then it becomes so wrapped up in it that if that business isn't there, then what is your purpose now going forward?
Correct. And a life without purpose is really no life. So you create the new purpose and what you're going to do. I mean, there are so many different options for you. And yes, you can play golf. And yes, you can have lunch with your mates. And yes, you could do some more travel. But if you've been spending 50, 60 hours a week in your business, you're not going to replace it just doing that. So think about what other things there might be. Local community clubs are always looking for people to help them out. Being mentor to others, in whatever it is you might do. There are many other passions. So what are your new passions that you are going to spend your time and become involved in and do? Your family, your I don't know, grandchildren might be it. And I have to say, and just to round off with my uncle, I mean, he did get out of that. And it did take a little while, took about 3 years. And of course, that affected the family, but, he was then absolutely focused on his 3 grandchildren and which they loved and he was very happy. And he did play more golf and they did travel and, do those things. So he created his new identity as being grandpa, which is terrific. So, so important. You create your new purpose in life. That's really what it boils down to.
But you also mentioned the financial side, and of course, that's the other big change that happens, isn't it? Because when you're in your business, you often run things through the business, you use the profits to support the lifestyle. And whilst you might get a big chunk of cash when you actually sell it, you've no longer got the regular income and the regular tax deductible things that you can do. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about how you work through that.
That's another area that requires professionals, of course. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a psychologist. I'm none of those things. I just am a person with a lot of experience. And it is one of the that's one of the crucial elements that I talk to business owners about. So, another client that I talked to had a large business, retailer, actually, retail business, and he had 21 different outlets. He did eventually sell those, and except he didn't sell all of them. He kept 3 because we'd talked about what are you going to do for cash flow, you know? And if you've got an opportunity to do something like that, well, he has somebody else running them, which is fine, but it creates ongoing cash flow for him, which is terrific, to be part of that. But you would expect one would hope that along the line, you've created other investments that are also part of your wealth creation strategy from quite a few years ago. So you are going to be able to look at where your potential future cash flows are coming from to be able to support the lifestyle that you'd like to have. I mean, that's we want to get to living the life that you want, after your business. That's where we want to get to. And there are strategies, as you well know, that, can help you develop that outside of the business as your business is growing and creating, some good returns for you, that using some of those returns to create other streams of wealth for you going forward. And that's so we like to work on 2 pathways. It's not only the business, but on the personal side, creating that wealth pathway as well. So they complement one another, and it's not to the exclusion of one or the other. And, the other area, and just to round it out as part of the story, of course, is that sadly my husband's cancer came back, and that was 6 years later. And so we had 2 other business partners in the real estate business, but we were able to manage that process of his exit from that business successfully because we had all of our documentation right. We had our buy-sell agreements. We had our shareholders agreements. In his case, it wasn't sudden, so that, we all knew it was coming, and he did pass away in 2019. So the funny thing was that the other 2 business partners found that they actually couldn't work together without him. It was funny. It was just like the oil in the business. So, and they both approached me independently, and I ended up stepping into the business for a couple of years to help out on a consulting basis, but I was acting there as the general manager and saw the business through COVID and, got it to the strength that it needed to be, and then replaced myself. And I personally stepped out, but that was never part of our deal. It just happened, because I had the skill set to be able to help out. So I think that the highlight there really is that you don't know what you don't know. So, we call it the 5 Ds, death, disaster, disease, divorce, disagreement. And in my book, I've got about 11 of them, all starting with D, and you can keep going, So it is about not knowing what's coming. And you can prepare your business so that it is exitable at any time. And should any of this ever happen, God forbid that, you have that sort of situation come up. But if you do,
You've got options.
yes, having a really good sound business so that it has become exitable and exit ready at any time should any of this actually happen. So you're not going to be forced to make a fire sale.
I think that's a really, yeah, really important distinction. It's like, you don't have to get a business exitable just to sell it. It just gives you options if something should change. And we all know, yeah, plans can change without us expecting it.
Another client who recently had great business, fantastic business, very exitable, although she didn't realize it. And when we sat down and went through doing an evaluation for her and having a look at all the different areas that she had in place, yeah, she can exit the business without, she just thought she couldn't exit it at all, but she can. And, yeah, she's just been sadly diagnosed with a pretty severe cancer. And so she has to get out of the business, but it doesn't have to be a fire sale. It is actually something that we've been able to have exit ready in her timeline so that she can leave it and leave it in really good hands. Yeah.
And that's I mean, sorry to hear about that with your client, but I mean, that's one of the things that does happen is that sometimes it's beyond your control and you have to make a decision. I want to talk a little bit about family businesses though, because, if you've got a seller in mind, like you obviously had an idea with your business, you wanted to sell it to a large corporation within the 7 to 10 year time frame. But for some people, they want to pass it on to their family, to their children, or even their wider family. But often a lot of their assets are tied up in that business. I was working with a family business just recently where mum and dad, everything I mean, they'd had a great life from running the business, but in order for them to continue to live their great life, they had to get some money out of the business to continue that lifestyle. And then you've got children who maybe hadn't considered what that business was worth and didn't have the funds or the facilities. So let's talk a little bit about how you can help as a family business to get those things ready, if you like.
One of the key points, Deborah, is that timing issue. So family businesses in particular would do well to start thinking about their succession or exitability as far ahead as they possibly can to make sure that they are set up and structured in such a way that they can leave the business and get out of the business and deal with some of the family issues that might come up. So I did actually recently have a conversation with someone who'd been working in the family business for 25 years. All of the documentation was still in one person's name. So, yes, no longer works in the business, but takes a consulting fee from the business. So is supported in the lifestyle. So it is really important to look at your structures well ahead of time to see how down the track, if you think you have family successes or you might have managers in the business who might want to maybe consider it if there's no family. These are, as you will know, relatively complex issues, but can be solved provided you start well ahead of time rather than waiting for, okay, I've had enough. I'm really over it. I'm leaving now. And right, what are we going to do here? So which I do see. We do also have issues with family businesses as well. One child is working in the business, wants to work in the business, wants to be able to take the business on, but there could be other siblings who don't want to, not really have much interest in it at all. But you as the parent want to make sure that you are fair. You want to be fair about the opportunity and the wealth, if you like, that you're going to leave. Because we are all going one day. It's binary. It's not a case of you will or you won't. You will go one day. Okay. So thinking about how over time, how you've managed to create other wealth streams, which you probably have. You might have some other investments, whether it be in stocks and shares or property or whatever else. Then it's really important to level up the valuations and what they might be worth in order for you to feel that you're being fair and taking care of all of the members of the family. But these are time issues more than anything. So giving yourself enough time to be able to address those and mull it over, think it over, and involve those children, who are going to be affected. Then if there's no one, who's wants the business at all, which was the case with my uncle because he had two daughters, neither of whom was interested, nor their partners. So, it was a case of selling down. And I do know that he sold to a couple of a few of the businesses he actually sold to the managers. So that was sort of employee buyout, basically, which is what I did, in May Nicholas. So, looking at those potential options, and maybe that's a way. There could be somebody who wants to do a management buyout. And, there are lots of different ways of financing that. And there's some really, in today's world, there are some really good, strong opportunities for those types of buyouts where they can be funded. You don't have to have the money to put the whole lot of money on the table. They can be funded and employees can buy their businesses that are not necessarily, you don't necessarily have an employee share plan or like an ESOP, although that is one possibility. But there's some very clever financing arrangements that are around where employees will be financed through insurance options and things like that. Very clever ways of financing those types of buyouts. So the bottom line is time. Don't leave it too late. Start thinking about it years ahead. Start thinking, sort of putting some pillars in place. Enjoy what you're doing by all means, but let's look at it and say, well, what potential options are there available to us and what might be the best one or two of the best options and seeing what we can achieve.
So you keep talking about time, and of course, time is of the essence. But in terms of, you should all, start as soon as you possibly can. But what is the minimum amount of time that you would generally need to really get your ducks in a row? If you had, yeah, everything sort of working perfectly, there's still going to be a minimum amount of time, right?
Yeah, I would definitely say if you can give yourself 3 years, that's terrific. Yeah. 3 years would be great because you usually have to get your finances more than anything in shape, which means maybe repositioning
Golf clubs.
some of the payments that have been supporting you, in your lifestyle might mean that. And because you've got to have your management accounts matching up with your tax returns and so forth. So, not that you can't adjust accounts, you can, but changes that can be made to show the true profitability of the business will give you a much higher return because businesses are sold on multiples. So multiple of your profit, basically. So what you may have been taking out of the cash flow, if you start getting that back into the business, will actually give you a much greater return when you apply the multiple to it.
And so let's talk a little about multiples because, and it's, they're different across different industries. What is how, as somebody who's valuing a business, what are they looking for and how does that affect the multiples?
They are looking for strong financials, number one, obviously. They're looking for growth. Is there growth still in the market? So don't ride your business over the top so that you squeeze the life out of it.
Saturated the market.
They're looking for some opportunity. So leave something in there for the next person that comes along. They're going to look at concentration, like customer concentration. If there's 47% of your business comes from one of your clients, then alarm, 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 So looking at customer concentration, particularly supplier concentration as well. If you're really reliant on just one or two key suppliers, then that also sends up some alarm bells. And even employees. If you are reliant on one or two employees in your business, then start thinking ahead of that as to how you can overcome that for the future, and what changes you may need to make around that. Cash flow. What's your cash flow cycle? I find that there's a lot of business owners don't really understand that. Anybody who's buying your business is going to be looking at two numbers. First of all, what they're going to pay you, and then how much they're going to need for working capital. Trying to understand what your working capital cycle is really important. They're going to look at things like your marketing and your differentiation. What makes you different? How do you stand out to your competitors? Are you in a monopoly? Highly unlikely. But what who's out there? Who are your competitors and how do you actually stack up against those? So they're going to be looking at that. Recurring revenue. Do you have a percentage of your revenue that's actually recurring, meaning either really good, strong contracts, but like subscription model is one description, but there's multiple ways of actually creating recurring revenue in businesses. So what do you have some of that? Even if you only have 20% of your revenue that is actually recurring, that's really good. You can demonstrate that you've got that because it is about the transferability of the business going forward. They're going to be looking at your Google reviews, your customer satisfaction, your net promoter score. How do you verify all of those things? And so it's all very well to say, oh yeah, we've got we've had no complaints from our customers. Oh, good. Well, show me. Show me. So looking for some sorts of verification for all of that. And of course, key to everything, of course, is the dependency on you as the owner. So if the business is actually dependent on you, then it's not transferable. It's not really you're not going to get what you think your business might be worth. So that's why you need a runway, to get yourself out of the business if it's currently dependent on you. And that boils down to systems. It really does boil down to systems and having a good, strong operating system, Deborah, in the business so that the business can run without you.
And even if the business does run without you, there's gonna be an more than likely, they're gonna ask you to stay on for a period of time, the golden handcuffs, even if it's a very, very well-run, well-oiled business runs without you. What can you sort of generally expect as somebody exiting in terms of that period that they might want you to stay on?
In my case, there's a thing called an earnout. So in the freight business, I had a 2-year earnout.
So you had to hit certain numbers in those 2 years in order to realize the full potential of that sale.
Yep, absolutely. And I would not recommend that to anyone if you can avoid it. If you can get your thank you mother for the rabbits and run with the money, go for it, I say, which is actually what we had with the real estate business in 2007. But you would have some sort of a handover, and it just depends on who's buying your business. If you are, like, for instance, if a private equity came along, and usually private equity usually involves some sort of recapitalization. So that's a way for you to get some money off the table, but it probably does mean you're going to leave some equity in the business. And private equity often sells it as a real positive because you've got you've left 30% in the business, but the upside of that is 5 years down the track when they might ask you to stay on for that long, you're going to be able to get more than we've just paid you for the 70% of the business while you've left your 30% in. But the lesson in that is be happy with what you get at the beginning because you might not get anything else after that. And also, the things that are the most important are the terms. So it's really important to understand the terms of the transaction. It, say you're asked to stay on and run the business for, let's just hypothetically say it's 5 years. Under what circumstances can you be removed if you've lost your drive and your passion for the business? If it's, say, private equity coming in, they may well put in a new manager. They may well sack you. And or you might also get to the point where, no, look, I've had enough. I don't like this anymore because you are now working for someone else. You've got to understand that, which is very difficult when you've been running the show for a long time. Now you have to go and work for someone else. And you're back to doing reports and sitting around board tables and all this sort of thing. So those are issues to really consider. But you know what? There are some great family offices and PE types of firms who really want you to stay in the business and they will really support you. But it's more a case of understanding who it is that you're dealing with and what the potential frailties might be of that relationship going forward.
Okay, so if I kind of summarize what I've heard so far, so we've got time, start sooner rather than later. You want to have at least 3 years and really be working on that. Exitable is not just about selling, it's about having options when something does happen to you. So even though you may not want to sell, if you've got an exitable business, it's always going to give you options where all of those 5 or 11 Ds comes in. And then it's not just about the business. I think this is what the really key thing for me. You need to think about what's your purpose beyond the business, because once you exit that business, what will life look like for you and how can you make the most of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, top 3 tips or tools, Kerry, for somebody who's listening in, sort of thinking, oh my goodness, I really should start this process because I haven't even thought about it. Or actually, this business wouldn't run without me. What am I going to do about it?
Well, you've just mentioned top 3 tips. Number one, time. Give yourself time. So even if it's not even in your thinking whatsoever, now is the time to start. So therefore, we do, let's see how reliant the business is on you for a start. And I can offer everybody a complimentary process to go through to be able to just get a toe in the water, to see where they sit on that. But start now, no matter what. Bottom line is getting your business to run without you. So that means starting with systems and getting those systems in place and having an operating system so that the business is running like clockwork. And lastly, your financials. Have a really good, thorough understanding of your financials and your cash flow cycle, because though that's the most important thing as well.
And in terms of the way that you work with people through this process, give us a little bit of a snapshot of what that looks like.
I will always start with a high level valuation, actually, and an evaluation based on those 8 key drivers that I actually mentioned as we were talking here. So we get some feedback and see exactly where you're sitting right now. So, and then from that, we go into a deep dive, looking at every single element of your business to work out where the priorities are. And then, so that's what we do. Just then we set the priorities and say, well, what areas do we have to work on? And we set a timetable to work on those so that you can put your stake in the ground. And then 12 months down the track, we'll have a look at where are we now and see what's shifted and make adjustments as we need to make adjustments going
So it's
forward.
like a gap analysis. You're kind of going, okay, so this is where we're at right now. These are the things that are missing. We then sort of start to tweak some of those, see what effect they have. And then I guess we repeat, yeah.
It is absolutely a gap analysis. Often when I say that to people, they don't quite know what I'm talking about.
No,
So
it's okay. No, I get it. Yeah. So you're doing that. You're doing the benchmarking. You're doing an evaluation. You're saying this is what it's worth at the moment. Here's all the things that obviously we have some challenges or opportunities around, and it's what we would need to do that. You'll work through it, start putting some of those things in place, have another look, so 12 months later, see what effect that's had.
and I have a couple of books, as you well know, that are available.
But to give us the titles of the books, because I think they're great.
So this one is The Uncensored Truth About Exit Strategies, and that's 10 myths every business owner must know before creating their exit plan. And the second one is $1 Million Payday. So that one is basically a how-to book. That's all. That's my version of business plans that win dollars. So this will help you go through what could effectively be a due diligence process. So, and I mean, ultimately, that's what we do. We actually do a reverse due diligence. So we're looking to find where the gaps are so that we can close the gaps. Yeah. These books are complimentary. I don't charge for these books at all. So anyone with the links, they can click on those links and just pop their address in. Not an ebook, physical books.
And I've read the 11 myths one. I haven't read the other one yet. But in terms of order, is that the best way to do it? Is to read the 11 myths one first and then sort of go into the how to if you feel inclined?
Right, exactly right. Which is actually the order in which I wrote them.
Okay, that's great. Well, we'll make sure that those links are there in the podcast notes and also details that you can contact Kerry if you wish to. Any kind of parting comments? Because I mean, somebody who's exited two very, very successful businesses, what would you say to somebody who is thinking about exiting their business?
I would simply say get started now. That's really the bottom line. I would say get started now. Look and see, I mean, whatever you need to do, whatever changes you may need to make, and whatever conversations you may need to have, just get started now because it's not simply you, that's those around you in your network, your employees and your family and your stakeholders. Everybody needs to get on the train. So start now.
Fantastic. Hey, look, Kerry, always got gold in our talks together. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And like I said, we'll have your details and things in the podcast notes.
Perfect. Thank you, Deborah. It's been a real privilege.
Thank you, Kerry.